Welcome back, everybody. This is Eric and Chad here from Moss Pawn & Gun. And today we're going to be talking a little bit about AR-15 accessories. All right, there's a lot of stuff out there that you can add to your AR, and really the AR is like the king of customization. I mean, it is the adult Lego of the gun world. I mean, you can just literally tack any type of device onto these things you can think of. So what we're going to try to do is showcase some items. These are our personal rigs right here we have built out, and we want to show you the kind of stuff we're putting on our rifles. This is in no way supposed to be a complete amount of accessories you can expect to find out there, but this is just the stuff we're running, and hopefully this video will allow you to glean a little bit of information about the type of upgrades you can make and what's entailed in doing so and everything like that. We actually just got done doing a pretty involved magazine torture test. If you guys haven't seen that, make sure you check it out. We spent a lot of time working with that. So what we're going to do is going to work down the rifle from the muzzle backwards. Okay, we're going to start out with brakes. Now, muzzle devices are kind of one of those things that can fall into a lot of different categories. Okay, you have everything from like a standard BIRDCAGE down here, and tell us about some of these other muzzle devices that are on your rigs here.
Well, we've got a standard A2 BIRDCAGE on this, just a flash suppressor, flash hider. This is a Smith VORTEX right here. This is a 4-prong flash hider. This here has a Griffin armament. I don't remember exactly the model, but we'll pipe it in. But this is a combination brake and flash hider, which really, I've never seen one that still doesn't flash, but it does help reduce recoil a little bit.
All right, right here we've got a Faxon single chamber clockable brake, very effective little brake. Now, muzzle brakes, what they do is they help prevent muzzle climb. When you're in rapid fire, the better the design of a muzzle brake, the less climb you're going to get. So if you're firing rapid, like you get a guy like Jerry Michalik or someone like that that's really fast behind the trigger, those muzzle brakes will help prevent muzzle climb. Muzzle brakes also lend themselves for having a quick attachment point for your suppressors and other types of devices like that. So if you have a Surefire muzzle brake or some type of Surefire muzzle device, you can attach your Surefire suppressor and you're good to go. And usually each amount of companies have their own proprietary brake that goes along with their suppressor. So just so you know, from a standpoint of muzzle devices, that's about what you're looking at. This is a little pistol that we have set up on a Spike's Tactical Warthog. This is basically like a blast attenuating type muzzle device, and what that's designed to do is to keep all that extra muzzle blast focused outward and keep it from getting all over your body. So if we're clearing rooms, we're doing something, other type of military or police duties, it allows me to shoot close to my buddy that's near me if I need to, but without that obnoxious blast getting near him and getting hot gas in his eyes or anything like that. So,
well, and two, not pissing people off at the range. You know, you're in one stall, the two guys around you, they're getting hit by blast coming out of the end of your muzzle, and like, God, get the hell out of here.
And the short barrel on this little guy, that's certainly an issue.
It is. That thing is very concussive.
Now, we also, before we move on to barrels, we are going to talk just briefly here about configurations. Now, each of these rifles kind of fills a certain role, and it's set up in a very specific configuration. The gun that I'm holding here is a pistol build. Now, there's certain legalities to building a pistol versus an AR or versus a rifle AR. This particular rig has a Dolos attachment, which we're kind of going ahead of ourselves, but this one's kind of a takedown, which is kind of neat. All right, we'll talk about that in a moment. But then you have, like, say, an SBR. So this is Chad's SBR. Then you have a rifle length, and of course the gas systems, but we'll discuss those in a moment. Now, when it comes to barrels, barrels come in a lot of different profiles, lengths, and chamberings, okay? And all of them have their own specific use. So with barrels, it can be all the way from like just a standard, this is a 7.5-inch barrel that's very short and stiff, doesn't have any lightning cuts in it. And the same thing on his SBR here. The barrel on this gun is kind of short and stiff, no lightning cuts, and that provides a nice rigid platform for everything to be nice and accurate. So with barrels, you also have a lot of different contours. Specifically, you look at like military M4 barrels, they're cut for like the grenade launcher attachment. Okay, you might have a lighter contour like, say, as on the Mag Tactical AR-15, where that barrel's cut very, very thin to reduce weight. Or a pencil barrel. Or you might have a medium contour barrel like the BCM that's down here on his DMR, and that barrel lends itself well to long range shooting. It's still nice and rigid, but without having the full weight of a full bull.
Exactly. The full bulls are usually about 0.930 inches, and a single barrel can be 3 to 4 pounds. And when you think about ARs, I mean, that's over half of the weight of a complete rifle on a typical build. So that is a heavy, heavy profile barrel. I mean, we like to stick with sort of like mid-weight to lightweight barrels on our builds. These two are medium profiles. This is a 14.5, this is an 18-inch. This is kind of an H-bar profile under the handguard, but it's 10.5 inches like Eric mentioned. And then this one here is a standard like 5.56 style barrel. It's like a basically like an M4 profile barrel, but it does not have the 203 cut on the front. And so that lends itself well to a lighter weight setup on the front end.
Right, and this is a Faxon barrel. This is a 14.5-inch Faxon barrel that we've pinned and welded this brake on. So with barrel length, you have to be conscious of the goal build that you're going for. If you're going for a rifle, of course the barrel has to be 16 inches or longer, which most factory barrels are 16.5 inches when you're talking about a rifle length barrel. Then their pistol barrels can be pretty much any length you want. You've got a 7.5, a 10.5, I think they make a 14.
You get 11.5s, 12.5s typically, 10.3s like the Daniel Defenses. There's a myriad of different lengths, and like 300 Blackout, you've got 8.3s, 8-inch barrels, 9-inch barrels, and so on and so forth.
So moving down the line, so you have your brake, your barrel, all right, then you have a gas block. Now there's a lot of upgrades out there when it comes to gas blocks. There's everything from low profile gas blocks that have Picatinny rail systems on the top. You've got the type of gas blocks that are bulletproof, kind of like the Geissele's that we're running. Now all of these rigs, save for his SBR here, we're running Geissele gas blocks on everything. All right, it has a bulletproofing function where you cross pin it, you drill it out and cross pin it, and that gas block is not going anywhere. Some of them just have set screws that you dimple the barrel and you drive those set screws in nice and tight with some red Loctite, and that keeps the gas block from moving around. On this particular SBR that Chad's running here, he's just got a standard A2 style gas block slash front sight post. Now, you know, that's the way the military runs them. They're cross pinned on the bottom and they have built-in A2 front sight, you know, on the front of it. So you can either go with a low profile, front sight post, pretty much anything you want in that regard.
Yeah, like Eric mentioned, the gas blocks come in a myriad of different sizes. You have, like he said, low profile that fit up under a handguard, and then like you mentioned, the Picatinny style. I used to have one of the JP competition style adjustable gas blocks, and it was aluminum. Now, most companies aren't making aluminum gas blocks anymore because they erode very quickly. You know, especially for competition use where you're shooting thousands of rounds a month with practice and competing. So they've gone to mainly all steel blocks. And like Eric mentioned, you know, the attachment method is slightly different for each one. The set screw method and the Geissele, which is actually called the bomb-proof installation. But it uses a 3/16 spring pin. You basically set your barrel and gas block up in an XY axis, drill through your barrel, cross pin it in place. That way the thing is never going to walk out of there unless you want it to. That's one thing. I've used some of the set screw style before and I've never had any issues with them, but I like that extra security of that bomb-proof installation.
Especially if you're setting up the gun for life and liberty. You know, if it needs to go bang every shot no matter what, and this is not, you know, weekend warrior gun that you're just going to go play with. It's something that's serious. You want a gas block that's going to stay nice and solid, and we tend to prefer the Geissele's. I like Geissele. Now, we talked about muzzle devices, barrels, gas blocks. All right, now we're going to talk about gas system length, okay? There are some distinct differences in the gas systems of different ARs and how they operate. So with gas blocks and gas systems as one kind of, you know, co-op topic there, you do have direct gas impingement and you have piston. Okay, and those are two completely different animals in terms of how the parts interchange. You know, you can't take a direct gas impingement carrier out and put it in your piston gun and it work. They're different carriers, different gas blocks, completely different assembly. But speaking of just the average AR-15 is usually going to be direct gas impingement. And what happens is gas forces are exerted through a tube and they work their way directly back into the action to operate the firearm, whereby a piston system actuates those gases against a centrally located piston. Now sometimes it's a short stroke, it might be spring loaded, and just like on an SKS where it operates and then it pushes back, operates a carrier, and it's just a spring loaded piston, that's a short stroke. Or sometimes they're a long stroke piston. You look at the Faxon AR-21, the carrier on that gun is literally just like an AK-47 carrier. That's what you call long stroke gas piston operation.
Also, unlike the POF, I think the POF ordnance rifles, those are long stroke, and the ad cores are long stroke as well because it's attached to the carrier. But we're discussing direct gas impingement today, and like Eric said, there's multiple gas system links.
Yeah.
And like on this pistol here, with a pistol link setup, you're picking up a lot of port pressure, like 5 inches basically in front of the barrel and or in front of the chamber, and that lends itself to very, very high pressure, and it's a violent operation of the system. And that's why these typically have a lot more wear and tear associated with them. If the port size is over just a little bit, it just lets too much gas in the system, and people have to run heavier buffers to slow the bolt down so it doesn't wear your receiver extension, doesn't wear your bolt out, doesn't wear your upper receiver out.
Or outrun the mag.
Or outrun the mag. But
Right.
you've got a 5-inch system, which is typically designated to the pistols, like a 7-inch barrel or shorter. Then you have a carbine system, which is found on like barrels from 10.3 on up. The carbine system can work on 10 and a half, 14 and a half, 12 and a half, the whole 9 yards. It picks up gas about 7 inches ahead of the chamber, and the port pressure is a little bit less. There's less wear and tear on the system, but in a lot of circles, that's kind of the minimum length gas system that you want to run for not only reliability, but keeping your gun actually from beating itself apart. But then these two rifles here, the 14.5 Faxon and then the 16-inch Faxon, operate on what's called a mid-length system. And the mid-length system was kind of created to bridge the gap between the full-length rifle system, which is what the AR platform was designed to use, was a full 12-inch gas system, and the 7-inch carbine system that was associated with some issues when in military and law enforcement use. So they bridged the gap, put the port at 9 inches, and the pressure is just low enough to give it very soft recoiling characteristics. It doesn't beat the system up, and it just makes for an all-around better shooting rifle.
And it's still reliable.
It is very reliable.
And then you have a rifle length system, which this DMR on the end here of Chad's, the barrel that he's running is a BCM, very high quality barrel. With that, you're also running a full length gas system, which is basically your traditional length, a full rifle length gas system like you'd see on an M16, A2, A3, what have you. With barrels and everything, I hate to jump back around, but while we're on the gas system, barrels are kind of one of those things. There are a lot of different chamberings. There's also different rifling profiles, different weights and everything like that.
Well, different materials as well.
Different materials. So a lot of these things can affect accuracy. Sometimes a barrel being more or less rigid than the other can affect the harmonics of the barrel, how it vibrates, how it works with certain weights of projectiles.
On the topic of barrels, like I mentioned, different materials. You got like 4140, chromoly steel. You've got chrome lined. You've got stainless steel. You've got different coatings. Phosphate, like manganese or zinc phosphating, like that's parkerizing. And then you've got black oxide coatings. You've got nitriding coatings as well, like NP3 or nitrocarburizing processes. There's a lot of questions out there about barrels and quality and such as that. A good quality, like chromoly barrel, like a 4140, will last probably longer than you will have that rifle. Probably more, it'll last more rounds than you'll ever shoot through that rifle. Chrome lined will last longer. It's easier cleanup. It doesn't. It lends itself well to easy extraction and feeding and such. But does it last much longer?
I would say chrome lined barrels generally, they clean easy. They're good in the field when you're worried about corrosion or copper fouling and all other kind of buildup. They clean easier, like you said. But I've always found that chrome lined barrels tend not to shoot as well.
They do not, because it is a coating on the internal surfaces
and it's going to
of
wear
the barrels.
and wear as the gun gets older.
A good quality button rifled or even like a cold hammer forged barrel will probably outshoot a chrome line barrel any day of the week. And for most recreational shooters or just guys like us or guys like you who want to just build a rifle, a standard chromoly barrel or even a stainless steel barrel will fit the bill just nicely, and you're not paying an arm and a leg for it. So.
Yep, absolutely. So we're going to move on to talk about rail system. Rail systems are one of those things that a lot of people get confused about because, they buy this, I don't know, Midwest Industries rail system, or they buy a, whatever the case may be, whoever makes the rail system, and they don't know that, you have to have a low profile gas block in order for the rail system to cover the gas block. Some people want that rail system to cheat out over the gas block and cover it up for cosmetic reasons. Maybe it looks better to them, or maybe they're wanting a rail system that's longer, so they might have longer arms and they might need a rail system that gives them that extra length. Like this one, you know, is it's a Mark III super modular. It's a 13-inch rail, so it's kind of long. If you got, you know, long arms, some people, you know, shoot thumb over bore, so they want to be able to hold the gun down nice and tight, and they want that extra length. You know, some folks might have, you know, they might want a forward grip or maybe a AFG or something there where they can just really pull the gun in the way they want, what's comfortable to them. You got some guys that'll hold their AR kind of like in this area and shoot like this and keep it tucked in nice and tight, like maybe a SWAT team operator or something like that. It really just depends. There's a myriad of different rail systems out there. The ones that we have on these guns are from Geissele Automatics. So with the Geissele rails, you have a couple of different varieties that they're offered in. They do offer them in a key mod configuration, an M-lock, and then their proprietary system. The rail sections slide into these slots, and then they torque down, and that way you just put the rails exactly where you want them. If you don't need a rail in one area, why bulk it up with a full quad when you can just put the rails where you need it and be done with it?
Sure.
One thing that, you know, earlier you saw me take the Dolos off here. This is a device called the Dolos, and this is actually a takedown attachment for an AR-15, and this particular one's set up on a pistol, obviously. But the Dolos is an example of something that this is meant for takedown purposes. These are actually made by Huntertown ARMS. So that's just to give you an idea. You got everything from takedown, very, you know, practical and simple, all the way up to add all the rails you want, or you have a full quad or no rails at all, depending on how you want to set the system up. So, you know, really it literally comes down to your, you know, preference and what you want to accomplish there. But there's a lot of great rails out there. You know, ATI offers some excellent offerings. You know, if you're wanting something that's, you know, not really expensive, you can go with MAGPUL or ATI, or there's any number of companies out there that make fore ends and rail systems and different attaching points. They all have their proprietary system in terms of how they install. If you notice on the Geissele, you know, it's got its system with its own proprietary barrel nut. But then you've also got this rail from, that's a Daniel Defense, isn't it?
It's a Daniel Defense, yeah.
Tell them about that rail there.
Well, like Eric said, some rails have proprietary barrel nuts. That's how they attach to the gun. Other rails, they'll either slip right over your standard barrel nut, or they clamp on top of it or clamp around it, like I think Midwest Industries used to have one from Troy Defense, and I think there's another rail manufacturer that's a top and bottom clamshell style, and you don't have to remove your barrel nut, which makes it an easy installation. But the Geissele's and several other brands, Yankee Hill Machine, they use proprietary barrel nuts, including Daniel Defense like we mentioned. So you just have to pull that off of there, and the rail clocks down like on the Daniel Defense. It's 6 bolts on this setup here. The Geissele's use 2 cross bolts that go through notches that are cut in the barrel nut, and makes for a very solid installation. And like Eric said, rail length is all about user preference. I like having a long rail because I like getting my hand out there, and unlike my 14.5 or my carbine style builds, I like running like a forward light or maybe a forward grip or something along those lines. Plus, like Eric mentioned, the Geissele is devoid of rails on the 3, 6, and 9 o'clock positions, and that's to give you options to put the rails where you want it. But if you don't want to run the rails, it gives you a nice thin profile to the rail system. A lot of people don't like that big bulky feel up front, like some of the older style rails. You know, they just feel really big in the hands.
Oh, and the weight. And
the weight too. They are very heavy, but when you remove the rails from the system, you're alleviating some of the weight from the rail system itself and making the rifle lighter.
Yeah, and the bulk. So from rail systems, moving on, basically with receivers, when we're talking about receivers being your upper and your lower, they're kind of one of those things where they're generally just kind of fall into a certain tolerance. I mean, you got these guys that throw out MIL-SPEC and then MIL-SPEC magwell and MIL-SPEC upper. How's this marked? How's that marked? Generally, a truly MIL-SPEC lower and upper will be marked Omega generally. So if you look at the upper, you'll see it looks kind of like a key slot. That's Omega. Now, all these other ones have their own meanings. To be honest with you, I'm not really up to speed on that kind of stuff. I just look at an upper as an upper and a lower as a lower. I try to keep the brand the same. So like, I've built a few of these out on Andersons. I've built a couple of Smith & Wesson M&P uppers and lowers. I've built out some CMMGs, some DPMS. I mean, generally, as long as they're not some junky manufacturer you never heard of or some Johnny-come-lately that's never made ARs that just decided to get into the AR business because of all this gun scare stuff, you know, a 1-year-old company, you know, just pick an upper and lower that's from a reputable manufacturer that you like. Now, some uppers and lowers are custom. Like you've got some that have certain machine cuts put into them to give them a cooler cosmetic look. Some of them have custom engraving and, you know, different logos and things like that you can get for them, which is kind of cool. And then there is some difference between, like, say, you know, a billet lower and like just a regular forged lower. And those 2 different types of lowers do have their strengths and weaknesses depending on what you want. I mean, sometimes the cost can kind of, you know, send some people away from some of like the higher end Adcors or Mag Tacticals or whatever,
well,
but you know.
Some of the billet machine sets are upwards of $300 to $400. And, you know, they are high quality pieces, and billet just means that the receivers are machined from a solid block of aluminum. Forging means that the liquid, the molten aluminum, is poured into a cast forging, and you get a rough receiver that's then finished machined. Now, for the AR-15 platform, all of the pressure is contained in the chamber and on the bolt face and in the receiver extension or the barrel extension. You don't really get any undue stress to the receivers themselves. That's why they can be made out of a lighter weight material like aluminum. And in my opinion, I've never had a single problem with the standard MIL-SPEC forged receiver. And I mean, I bought several of the Andersons. I mean, you can get the things for $50 to $60. It's kind of hard to beat a $60 AR receiver.
Oh, I know.
And one that works. I mean, we put several of them together and they work just fine. But I've got DPMS and spikes right here. And spikes is kind of cool, like Eric mentioned.
Yep.
You know, they have the custom engravings. They've got like the Honey Badger, the Punisher. They've got all sorts of cool stuff, so you can make your gun your own. But if you just want something simple, I mean, it pays to go with something that's a little bit more affordable and put the money in something that's higher quality, like a good quality rail or something along those lines.
And we'll talk about that as we go. You know, my particular lower on mine is a LARUE Custom Weaponry. You guys may know them from Duracoat, but this particular one is a billet. So it's very, very high quality machined lower that I picked up. Excellent people to work with. And of course, this is a CMMG. So all of these are different lowers. Lowers are lowers. Also, uppers and lowers can be made out of polymer or a composition of steel and polymer inserts, depending. Like ATI has their hybrid, Omni hybrid, okay? And basically, the back of the receiver, where the buffer tube screws in, has a steel insert. And they have, you know, steel placed in strategic locations where the guns are known to fail from having polymer lower versus aluminum. So that might be an option for some of you if you're trying to cut weight. I would suggest most people just go with just a regular forged MIL-SPEC lower and be done with it. Same thing on the upper. So that pretty much covers uppers and lowers for the most part.
Well, one thing I wanted to mention too, talking about like the polymer uppers and lowers, remember like the old Bushmaster carbon 15s or the new Wyndham weaponry carbons, you know, those are like a polymer style upper and lower, and I can't tell you how many of those that I've seen where the aluminum rail on the top of the receiver has been ripped off. And see, there's no repair in that. Once it's gone, you know. So that's one thing you might want to consider. The receivers are fairly cheap and very lightweight, but there's another option out there. Mag Tactical produces their magnesium alloy uppers and lowers, which are about a 30 to 40% weight savings over aluminum and just as strong.
Oh yeah,
so,
absolutely. And I've seen some of those polymer receivers actually strip out, you know, the barrel where it screws in. I've seen that whole entire rig. Basically, usually it happens when people are trying to get a little overzealous and making adjustments on either a muzzle brake, or they're trying to get overzealous on changing out a rail system.
Takedown pins. I've seen them ripped off on the takedown pins several times.
So that covers uppers and lowers. So moving along, we're going to talk about bolt carrier groups. Bolt carrier groups are kind of one of those things that it really just depends on personal preference, the amount of money that you want to spend. The one that Chad's pulling out right here is the Sharp's RELIA-BOLT. This particular bolt has an MP3 coating, which is basically kind of like nickel boron. Think of it like the way a nice non-stick pan is coated. It's a slippery, hardened, non-stick type coating that allows carbon and dirt and other things to just wipe right off the bolt real easily. This particular bolt, the RELIA-BOLT, actually has a lot of profiling that's done on the locking lug recesses to allow it to go into battery smoother and more efficiently, a lot quicker. Usually any MIL-SPEC carrier is also going to have the gas tube or the gas key staked in place, okay? Always look for a staked gas key. That's always going to be the telltale sign of a good quality, you know, MIL-SPEC bolt carrier group. Also, this particular arrangement right here, you have AR-15 and M16 bolt carrier groups. One of them will have a shaved portion on the rear that will not set off any type of an auto sear. Even if it was in a real machine gun, it won't trip an auto sear because of this cut that's put along the back. That's an AR-15 bolt. This is an M16 bolt. It has the extra surface area there, so if you have an auto sear in the gun, this will work in a machine gun or a standard AR-15. Not really any difference in performance. It's just some people want the M16 bolts in case they ever want to run a gun that has an auto sear of a buddy's or something like that. Pretty straightforward for the most part. There are a lot of upgrades that can be made on everything from just as simple as like your extractor. Some guys run some really nice bulletproof style of extractor. That's about the only thing I've ever really seen like go out on them or go bad is, you know, I've seen them tear extractors. I've seen them shear gas keys if they're not, you know, staked in nice and tight.
Well, or if the screws to hold the gas key in place are not of the highest quality. You know, if they're not properly hardened, they'll be real brittle and they'll just snap right off, you know, eventually. But
they'll shear.
Yeah, Eric was mentioning the bolts, like the RELIA-BOLT, the radius locking lugs here just make for smoother operation, just in the standard operation of the bolt. But the idea has been around for quite some time, and when I first built this DPMS lower out back in '04, I actually purchased one of the LMT enhanced bolt itself, and it had kind of a scallop design and very radius design. And Eric mentioned the extractors. This extractor actually has 2 springs. It's got a dual extractor spring setup, so if one does fail, the gun will not fail. It will still keep on rolling along.
Absolutely. So that's one thing to consider. Now, we're going to talk briefly here about coatings. I'm going to move on because, guys, bolt carrier groups are one of those things. There's a lot of different ones out there. I know this video might be getting a little long. We're trying to kind of roll along here. You have a few different basic types of coatings. All right, this is a titanium nitriding. It's pretty much the exact same type of coating they put on reloading dies and things like that. Titanium nitriding is just, you know, gives it a gold appearance, and of course the luster of the appearance depends on the surface prep. So if it's polished, it'll be shiny looking like a gold brick or whatever. If it's dull like this carrier was probably bead blasted down and then thrown in there. You got your titanium nitriding. Not really used quite as much anymore as some of the other options. Then you've got Nibix, which is basically MP3. A Nibix coating, like we explained earlier, we already explained the Nibix coating. This is what most of your high-end bolt carrier group and bolt manufacturers are using now, just because it's lubricity capabilities and also for ease of maintenance, cleaning it off. Then you have black oxide, which is the standard. You know, most of your AR-15 parts that are black are going to be black oxided. That's pretty straightforward there. You are going to have some military bolt carrier groups that are Parkerized.
Well, yeah, and like Eric mentioned, you know, this bolt carrier group from Sharps does not require lubrication because it's self-lubricating, but I tend to put a little bit of lube inside my upper receiver anyways. The phosphated or the black oxide bolt carrier groups, you put a couple of drops of oil inside of your port, and it spreads all around the bolt carrier group to lubricate it. So it's a pretty neat feature of those. And that's just kind of old school, and that's the least expensive option.
Yep. All right, so moving forward, of course there are a ton of aftermarket dust covers. You know, they have a hinge dust cover on the AR-15 that's spring loaded, and it has a detent that just snaps into the upper. Guys, I think we all understand what that entails. I mean, there's a lot of aftermarket magazine releases, trigger guard covers and things like that, forward assists, dust covers, all type of other minor accoutrements, backup sights. There are a ton of other components you can get. There's everything from sling point mounts, like on this SBR, we've got a MAGPUL ASAP, which is a sling point mount that's mounted behind the receiver in front of the buffer tube assembly. All right, and then you've got additional sling point mounts that just mount to any type of Picatinny rail, and then you've got a QD sling mount, okay? It's just a button you push, and then that QD will pop on and off. Pretty straightforward, okay? So really, that's kind of the major components. You do have triggers. We're going to talk about triggers a little bit here. AR triggers are one of those things that when it comes to accuracy and when it comes to wringing the maximum amount of potential out of a given system, upgrading the barrel and upgrading the trigger are going to be your probably your two first things you end up doing, short of, you know, how good of an optic you use.
Well, I tend to disagree with that, because most of the guns that you're going to get off the shelf nowadays, if you buy a stock rifle, say like a Smith & Wesson MMP-15, it's going to have a pretty damn high quality barrel from the get-go. But if you add a quality trigger and you free float your barrel, which by adding one of these rail systems that does not have any contact point besides the barrel nut, then you're going to accomplish that. But you can cut group sizes typically in half with a quality like 2-stage match style trigger, or even a very high quality single stage trigger.
Well, you know, depending on how you want to run that, it really depends. I mean, if you, let's say you buy a decent AR, like Chad said, you buy a nice MMP right out the gate or something like that. All right, well, you're not sure the true accuracy potential of that barrel. You know, you take it out, you shoot it with the factory trigger, you determine the accuracy is not what you really want to see. Yeah, if you know you're going to upgrade the trigger, then yeah, put the nicer trigger in the gun, shoot the factory barrel, and like you said, your group size could shrink. Then, if your group size doesn't improve by changing the trigger, then you can make the decision, okay, now I want to swap to a nicer barrel. We got barrels from Faxon, we got a BCM right there.
Rock River.
Little Rock River, and I think this one's a Rock River also, if I'm not mistaken. So it really depends. Now, with triggers, what we run in most of our guns are the Geissele's. You got the Super Semi-Autos in yours. Super
Semi-Auto Enhanced, which is the lighter version of their fixed 2-stage trigger. I've got that in all 3 of these guns, plus a pistol lower at the house.
All right, and this is a flat shoe. This one is...
That is the Super Dynamic SSA, I believe. It's a Super Semi-Auto, which is a 2-stage style trigger, but Super Dynamic trigger shoe, which is a flat shoe instead of a curved shoe.
I tend to prefer a flat shoe on a trigger. That's just my opinion. This particular rig is mine. The little trigger that's in this one is a Wilson Combat. It's a single stage trigger. It's very light. So you have basically 2-stage triggers and you have single stage triggers. Single stage triggers, it really comes down to preference, but with a 2-stage trigger, you have an initial take up that generally the entire trigger length might be, say, 3.5 pounds. And say your initial take up is like 1.5 pounds of that or 2 pounds of that, and then your remaining trigger squeeze on the second stage, like on these Geissele's, breaks at a nice crisp 1.5 pounds.
Yeah, these break at I think 1.2 pounds on the second stage. First stage take up is like 2 pounds, give or take, but it has very, very minimal over travel. I mean, it breaks like a carrot. It is just such a good trigger. And I mean, I've used Rock River, or actually I've used Bushmaster 2-stage triggers that are adjustable. And they have a special safety, and they have set screw adjustments in the trigger, so you can adjust take up, over travel, you can adjust the actual weight of the trigger. So there are fully adjustable triggers out there to set them up per your preference. But these are set up more for like accurate shooting at longer ranges and whatnot, but they do work in a like a CQB style arrangement. The single stage triggers are going to be the fastest thing out there. I mean, you know, minimal travel initially, really short break, crisp break, low over travel. It's going to be able to, you know, shoot real quick, you know. So
yeah, that thing runs like a scalded dog, but then again, so does this Geissele here.
It does.
Now, triggers, you know, kind of one of those things. There's a lot of different stuff out there, guys. So, you know, make sure you research what you're buying. Make sure you're getting something that is worth your money, okay? And that's the whole point of this video. We want you to understand the different accessories that are available to you and what's out there. You have grips and stocks, okay? We're going to pull this into one category. I mean, grips are just like anything else. There's a million grips out there. Some of them are great, some of them suck, but it all comes down to preference, guys. It really, honestly, is just preference. I mean, like on this little pistol rig, I've got the MAGPUL PDW grip, which is very, very slim and low profile, almost too tiny. But I like it because it's just kind of small. And for just an everyday carry gun, it's less bulk that I've got attached to this gun. I like to keep everything small and compact. That's why I'm running this VORTEX SPARC on here, because I like the low profile of this optic. I want a low profile rig, something small. All right, but then you can get all the way up to some of the other offerings where you've got grips that have, you know, interchangeable straps that go on the back of them, interchangeable front pieces, you know, to match the contour of your hand. It really does just depend. I mean, they've got some of the match style that have the palm swells in them. So if you're building a heavy barrel DMR or a heavy barrel 1,000-yard AR or something, I mean, you get the adjustable palm swells that are cut just for you that allow your hand to, like, you know, rest in the same place each time.
Consistency.
So, yeah, consistency. And grips are kind of one of those things. Like these little rubberized MOE pluses that he's running on here, these are great. Another excellent MAGPUL product. ATI makes a very effective, recoil absorbing grip. There's Scorpion that's excellent, for some of you guys that are into that sort of thing.
Bigger hands.
Yeah, so if some guys have bigger hands, some of the ATI offerings are excellent. Same goes for a lot of other companies. And then with stocks, there's a ton of options out there for stocks. I mean, once your base hanger is in place, your buffer tube, you've got a commercial spec and a military spec. And of course, you have to choose the appropriate stock because the diameter is slightly different on each one. So you have to make sure you use the right one.
If you guys are wondering, common rule of thumb between MIL-SPEC and commercial stocks, MIL-SPEC is going to have a 90-degree rear. Commercial is going to have a slightly angular rear, about 15 degrees or so. That's one of the easiest ways to tell them apart. But most of the guns that you see on the table have short carbine style buffer tubes. This one has a rifle length buffer tube. It uses a different buffer and a different spring, but you get a longer length of pull that's set. And these are all collapsible here, so these are adjustable for length of pull.
Absolutely.
And we're running just a MAGPUL rifle stock here. I've got two VLTOR CLUBFOOT stocks. I think this is called the IMOD nowadays, and this is just a CLUBFOOT original VLTOR that I've had for 10 years. And then what do you have on that one?
This is a MAGPUL ACS. Okay. So MAGPUL makes great stuff. ATI makes great stuff. I mean, there's a lot of companies out there that are producing some excellent AR accessories, and they're not very expensive. You can really deck out your AR just how you want when it comes to stocks and everything like that, even rail systems, without spending a ton of money. Now, this is a pistol build, so this is not a stock. This is an arm brace. This is one of the SIG-TACs Sig Sauer produces, and it's basically just an arm brace that attaches to your arm, allows you to stabilize the gun better when you're shooting it, with one hand.
The difference between the pistol buffers and the rifle buffers, the pistol buffers are tubular. They do not have the cut on the bottom to accept a collapsible stock. You can slip it over there, but all it's going to do is spin around. So these actually have the adjustment on the bottom for the collapsible stock. That's the main difference.
Yeah,
so
there's the cuts and the notches put in there to allow for your stock to snap into place with each adjustment level. I think that pretty much covers things well. I mean, there's always going to be things that you leave out in videos like this because there's so many different accessories you can add on ARs. I mean, obviously, we have a variety of different optics on these guns. I mean, I've got this VORTEX SPARC-II. It's basically kind of like an AIMPOINT T1 micro, very small, lightweight optic. Infinite battery life, seemingly infinite. On this particular SBR, we're running just regular like EOTECH 550.
This is actually a 553. It's the night vision compatible model. Takes CR123s, and it has the older style ARMS quick detach system built into the sight, which is really, really cool. I like a QD sight because I can switch it between different guns. Got an AIMPOINT. I think this is a Comp M2.
That's an M68.
This is an M68 M2.
Yeah, they have a couple of different models. The military ones takes like these little weird watch batteries, but a lot of the civilian ones they're shipping out now, they'll take standard AA battery and got it last forever. And
then on this one here, I'm running a LARUE SPR-15 mount, and I've got a VORTEX RAZOR HD 1:6 by 24, and it's a 30mm tube. Illuminated reticle, very, very nice, high quality optic. Well, yeah, I mean, that particular rig is set up, like maybe a 3-gun rig, a DMR. This is just a good everyday kind of just walking around gun. This is kind of your defensive, home defense, truck gun, something small and handy, easy to get in and out of your vehicle and everything like that. This, just everyday plinking gun, fun gun is what I built that for. This is an excellent option if you just want a fun toy, and it's also classified as a pistol. So in certain states, depending on what the laws are, how all that comes to play, this is a type of thing that you can carry in your car loaded, and it's considered a handgun. So you can also carry that across state lines if you're going to a friend's house or family, you want to take that and shoot. My SBR, I have to file special paperwork in order to take this and transport it across state lines. Right. So that is one hiccup with these, but you have an SBR lower, have a pistol lower, have rifle lowers, you can pretty much do whatever you want to do. For the most part. So anyway, guys, we appreciate you sitting through this video. We know it was kind of long, but hopefully you guys gleaned some information about the different things that you can come to terms with on ARs. I mean, it's really not that complicated, guys. You just kind of have to take a step back, figure out what the type of build you want to go with, or don't. You may just want a blasting rig and you want to deck it out like the Mall Ninja we built and make it all crazy. That's fine. It doesn't have to fill a specific niche, but if you go into building an AR with a specific
goal in mind, then this should give you some ideas of the different configurations you can come up with and kind of what those configurations lend themselves to.
Well, like Eric said, it is one of those things, it can be a little bit overwhelming. Sometimes, I mean, a guy getting into ARs, whatever, it's like, do I buy or do I build? And you see so many products out there, it can really just boggle your mind, and you just can't make a decision on it. But if you're that kind of guy, just start with the base rifle and then just work your way up. Now, you're going to spend a little bit more money that way eventually to get what you want, but that's the beauty of these rifles. They can be built any way you want. I mean, any type of configuration. So the sky is pretty much the limit with ARs.
Absolutely. Well, guys, we appreciate you watching today's video. Check back for more. We've got a ton of videos in the pipeline. A lot of cool things happening in 2015. This has been a great year for us. We're here right at the tail end of December. It's been an awesome year here in 2014, but moving forward, I think we're going to have a great year. We've got some exciting things planned. Stay tuned. We'll catch you guys next time.